The nurse leaned down, her breath warm against my ear, and whispered 7 words that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. Your father isn't the man you think. My name is Lorraine Mitchell, and I'm 53 years old. That moment to 14 a.m. on a Tuesday in March in room 407 of Mercy General Hospital. With my father's labored breathing counting down his final hours, split my life into before and after. Before, I was a middle school English teacher, divorced mother of 2 grown daughters, owner of a townhouse with a mortgage I'd pay off in 12 years, keeper of routines and reasonable expectations. After I became a woman standing in the wreckage of 4 decades of lies, holding pieces of a past that didn't fit together the way I'd been told, trying to assemble a truth no one had prepared me for. But let me start at the beginning, because the story doesn't make sense without understanding what I believed for 53 years before that nurse's whisper unraveled it all. I grew up in a small house in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in a neighborhood where everyone knew your business and pretended they didn't. My father, Harold Mitchell, worked for the Postal Service for 42 years. He was the kind of man who wore the same 3 shirts on rotation, who ate a peanut butter sandwich for lunch every single day, who had exactly 2 beers on Friday nights and attended church every Sunday, not because he was particularly religious, but because it's what decent people do. My mother, Ruth Mitchell, died when I was 9, breast cancer that came fast and left faster. I remember her in fragments, hands that smelled like vanilla, a voice that sang hymns while washing dishes, a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. After Mom died, it was just Dad and me. He never dated, never remarried, never even mentioned the possibility. When I asked him once, at 14, if he ever got lonely, he said, "I had my great love." Some men get that. I'm one of the lucky ones. It sounded romantic then. Now, knowing what I know, it sounds like something else entirely. Dad raised me the way men of his generation did, with discipline, routine, and an affection that showed itself in packed lunches and paid tuition rather than words. He came to every parent-teacher conference, every school play, every track meet where I ran mediocre times but gave maximum effort. He taught me to drive in the grocery store parking lot on Sunday mornings. He co-signed my college loans and never once made me feel guilty about the debt. When I got pregnant at 22 with my oldest daughter, Jasmine, he didn't yell or shame me. He just said, "You're going to be a good mother. You come from good mothers." And I cried because I missed mine so much, it felt like drowning. I married Jasmine's father, Urkus, because I was young and scared and thought that's what you did. The marriage lasted 8 years, long enough to have another daughter, Keisha, and learn that love and compatibility are not the same thing. Marcus was a good man, just not the right man. And we divorced amicably when the girls were 6 and 3. Dad helped me move into my first solo apartment, assembled furniture without complaining, and never once said "I told you so," even though he probably had concerns. For the next 25 years, my life was beautifully ordinary. I taught 8th grade English to students who mostly tolerated me and occasionally surprised me with brilliance. I raised 2 daughters who became good humans despite my mistakes. I dated occasionally, loved rarely, and built a life that felt solid if unspectacular. Dad remained at constant Sunday dinners at his house, help with car repairs I couldn't afford, a phone call every Wednesday at 7 p.m. sharp. Checking in, Lorraine. Making sure you're still standing. Still standing, Dad. 3 months ago, Dad called on a Thursday instead of Wednesday, which should have been my first warning. His voice sounded thin, like paper held up to light. "I need you to take me to the doctor tomorrow," he said. "I've been having some chest pain." "How long?" I asked, already grabbing my keys even though it was 10 p.m. and he was 20 minutes away. "A week or so. Don't come over tonight. I'm fine until morning." "But Lorraine..." "Don't tell the girls yet. No sense worrying them until we know what we're dealing with." What we were dealing with was stage 4 lung cancer, metastasized to his liver, his bones, his lymph nodes. The oncologist, a woman who looked 12 years old, said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Mitchell. At this stage, treatment would do more harm than good. We're looking at weeks, maybe a month or two with hospice care. Dad nodded like she'd told him the weather forecast. Thank you, doctor. Then, turning to me, let's go home, Lorraine. We've got planning to do. In the car, I cried so hard I had to pull over in a Walgreens parking lot. Dad sat quietly, letting me rage and keen, and when I finally ran out of tears, he handed me a napkin from his glove compartment and said, I've had a good life. Better than I deserved. Don't waste your grief on me, baby girl. Save it for something that matters. You matter, I sobbed. I know, but my dying doesn't. Everybody dies. I'm just getting to do it with my daughter beside me, and that's a mercy most men don't get. He refused to tell Jasmine and Keisha for another week. Let them have a few more days of normal, he insisted. When we finally told them, Jasmine went silent and Keisha cried into her hands. Both of them came home immediately, Jasmine from D.C., where she worked in nonprofit management, and Keisha from Chicago, where she was finishing a graduate degree in public health. They moved into Dad's house, which suddenly felt both too full and too empty, and we took shifts caring for him, cooking meals he couldn't eat, pretending we weren't watching him disappear. Hospice started 2 weeks before he died. A parade of kind strangers came through, teaching us about morphine dosages and bed sores and what active dying looks like. Most of the nurses were warm but professional, there to manage pain and offer dignity in the final chapter. But one nurse was different. Her name was Angela Porter. She was maybe 60, black like us, with gray locks pulled back and the kind of eyes that looked at you like she could see 3 layers deeper than your skin. She worked the overnight shifts, which meant she was there during the long, dark hours when dying people sometimes get restless and families fall asleep in chairs and the house creaks like it's morning too. The first night, Angela worked. She moved through Dad's room with a competence that felt like grace. She checked his vitals, adjusted his pillows, administered medication, all while humming something that sounded like a hymn but wasn't one I recognized. You girls should get some rest, she said to me and my daughters. I'll sit with him. That's what I'm here for. I want to stay, I said. You've been here for 16 hours straight, Angela observed. He needs you rested more than he needs you present every second. Trust me to take care of him for a few hours. I promise I'll wake you if anything changes. I looked at Dad, already mostly asleep from morphine, and felt the exhaustion hit me like a truck. Okay, just for a little while. Went to lie down on the couch in the living room. Jasmine and Keisha were already asleep in their old bedrooms. The house arranged like a museum of the people we used to be. I woke to Angela shaking my shoulder gently. The clock read to 14 a.m. Ms. Mitchell, she said quietly, I think you should come. He's slipping, stumbled into Dad's room. Jasmine and Keisha were already there, standing on either side of the bed, holding his hands. His breathing had changed louder, more labored, with long pauses that made my heart stop until the next breath rattled in. Can he hear us? I asked Angela. Hearing is often the last sense to go. She said, talk to him. Tell him what you need to say. We did. All 3 of us taking turns. Saying the things you say when someone is leaving. Thank you for raising me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for every ordinary moment that built this life. I told him I loved him. I told him he was the best father a girl could ask for. I told him it was okay to go, even though it wasn't. Even though every cell in my body wanted him to stay. His breathing slowed. The pauses got longer. And then Angela leaned down, checked his pulse, and whispered something to him I couldn't hear. She straightened, touched my arm, and said, he's at peace now. Dad had stopped breathing. Just like that. 42 years of postal routes and peanut butter sandwiches and Sunday church ended in a moment so quiet I almost missed it. We sat with him for a while. The girls cried. I held his hand until it started to cool, which felt obscene. My father's hand shouldn't be cold. Then I let go because I couldn't bear it. Angela took care of the necessary calls, the death certificate paperwork, the removal service. She moved through it all with an efficiency that should have felt clinical but somehow didn't as she was preparing to leave. After the funeral home had taken Dad's body and the girls had finally gone to lie down, Angela stopped me in the hallway. "Ms. Mitchell, can I speak with you privately?" "Of course," I said, too numb to wonder why. We sat in the kitchen. Angela folded her hands on the table and looked at me with those X-ray eyes. "What I'm about to tell you is going to be hard to hear. 'Kay?" I said, bracing for something about Dad's final moments. Some medical detail I'd missed. "Your father isn't the man you think," Angela said. I blinked. "What?" "Harold Mitchell, he isn't who you think he is." She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. "He asked me to give this to you after he died. He chose me specifically for his hospice care because we knew each other a long time ago." "I don't understand," I said, taking the envelope with shaking hands. "Read it," Angela said. "And when you're ready, if you're ready, call me. My number is inside. You're going to have questions, and I'm one of the few people left who can answer them." She left. I sat in my father's kitchen, holding an envelope with my name written in his handwriting, and felt the first crack in the foundation of my life. Inside the envelope was a letter. 5 pages written in the careful script Dad used for important things. I made coffee I wouldn't drink and sat down to read. "My dearest Lorraine, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I don't know if that makes this easier or harder to write, knowing I won't be there to see your face when you learn the truth. Maybe that's cowardice on my part? Probably it is. But I couldn't die with this lie still standing between us. And I couldn't bear to tell you face to face and watch everything you believe about your life crumble. First, the truth that matters most. I love you more than anything in this world. You are my daughter in every way that counts in my heart and my soul. In every moment I've been proud of you and terrified for you and grateful to know you. That will never change, no matter what else you learn. But biologically, Lorraine, I am not your father." I stopped reading. My hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. I read the sentence again. And again, it didn't make sense. It was English. I taught English. I knew what words meant. But this sentence was meaningless. A glitch. A mistake. I kept reading. "Your mother, Ruth, my everything, couldn't have children. We tried for years. Doctors, treatments, prayers, everything. Nothing worked. It broke her heart in a way I couldn't fix, and that broke mine in 1971, when we'd been married for 8 years and had finally accepted childlessness as our reality. Ruth started volunteering at a women's shelter downtown. She never told me much about the work. She said some stories weren't hers to tell, but I knew it mattered to her. She came home exhausted, but lit up in a way I hadn't seen in years. One night in February 1972, she came home crying. Not sad crying, desperate crying. She said a girl at the shelter, barely 17, was pregnant and terrified. The father had vanished. Her family had disowned her. She was going to give the baby up for adoption because she had no other choice. But she wanted the child to have a good life, a real family, not to be lost in the system. Ruth looked at me and said, "We could be that family, Harold. We could take this baby. We could be parents." I had 100 reasons to say no. The logistics, the legality, the questions people would ask. But Ruth looked at me with hope I hadn't seen since the last negative pregnancy test, and I couldn't say no to her. I'd never been able to say no to her. We arranged everything privately, quietly. The girl, your birth mother, was named Caroline. She was black, like you. I'm white, like you know. Ruth was black. We told people Ruth was pregnant, which was easy because she'd gained weight from stress, and we lived in a neighborhood where people minded their business more than they let on. Caroline moved into a small apartment we rented for her, and Ruth visited her every day. You were born on September 3rd, 1972. At 6:22 in the morning, Carolyn held you for 10 minutes, kissed your forehead, and handed you to Ruth. "Take care of her," she said. "Love her enough for both of us." And we did. God, Lorraine, we did. We raised you as ours. Legally, through a private adoption that a lawyer arranged. On paper, you were always Ruth's daughter and mine. But the story we told that Ruth had been pregnant, that you were our biological child, that was the lie. We told it because we thought it would be easier for you. Because we were scared of questions we didn't know how to answer. Because we loved you so much that the biological truth felt irrelevant. Ruth died never regretting this. The cancer took her so fast we barely had time to say goodbye. But in her final days, she made me promise two things. Take care of you, and tell you the truth when you were old enough to understand it. I kept the first promise. I've failed at the second. I told myself you were too young, then too fragile, then too settled in the life we'd built. I told myself the truth would hurt more than the lie. I told myself a lot of things that boiled down to, I was too scared to risk losing you, but now I'm dying. And I can't take this lie with me. You deserve to know where you come from. You deserve to know that Caroline didn't abandon you out of cruelty, but out of love and desperation. You deserve to know that Ruth and I wanted you so fiercely we broke rules and told lies and built a whole life around protecting you. Angela. Porter was Caroline's social worker at the shelter. She helped arrange everything. She's the only person still alive who knows the whole truth. That's why I requested her for hospice, so she'd be there at the end. She could give you this letter, so you'd have someone to talk to who knew your mother, your birth mother, Caroline Harper. She was 17 when you were born. I don't know what happened to her after. We agreed it was better not to stay in contact, cleaner, safer for everyone. But Angela might know. She might be able to help you find her, if that's what you want. Or you might want nothing to do with this. You might want to take this letter, burn it, and go on living the life you've always known. I wouldn't blame you. I'm the one who lied. You're the one who has to decide what to do with the truth. Whatever you choose, know this. You are my daughter. You have been from the moment Ruth put you in my arms. Blood doesn't make family. Love does. And I have loved you every single day of your life. I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you this while I was alive. I'm sorry you have to learn it like this, from a letter from a dead man who should have trusted you with the truth years ago. I hope someday you can forgive me. All my love, always. Dad dies sat in that kitchen until the sun came up. I read the letter 6 times. I cried until my eyes swelled shut. I stared at the walls of the house I grew up in and wondered how many other lies were hiding in the drywall. Jasmine found me at 7 a.m., still sitting at the table, the letter in front of me. Mom, are you okay? You look what's wrong. I looked at my daughter who I'd raised the way Dad raised me, with love and routines and ordinary moments that built a life. My daughter who had half my DNA and none of Dad's, 'cause Dad wasn't my biological father, which meant the genetic link I thought connected us was a fiction. Mom, Jasmine said again, her voice rising. I handed her the letter. Read this. She did. Her face went through the same journey mine had: confusion, disbelief, shock, grief. When she finished, she looked at me with tears streaming down her face. Grandpa wasn't. No, I said. He wasn't. But he was, she said. He was your dad. He raised you. He loved you. That's what matters, right? I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know what matters anymore. Keisha came downstairs, saw us both crying, and said, "What happened?" We told her. She read the letter. She cried. We sat together in the ruins of what we thought we knew and tried to figure out what to build next. The funeral was 4 days later. We buried Dad next to Mom in the cemetery where I'd visited her grave every year on the anniversary of her death, bringing flowers and talking to a headstone like she could hear me. Now I stood between their graves and wondered if everything I'd told her over the years was based on lies. Had she laughed at my stories about raising her granddaughters? Had she worried about my divorce? Or was she, wherever the dead go, trying to tell me a truth I'd been too alive to hear? After the funeral, after the reception, where people told me what a good man my father was, and I nodded because he was. After everyone left and the house fell silent, I called the number Angela had left in the envelope. She answered on the second ring. Lorraine, I've been waiting for your call. Can we meet? I asked. I need to know everything. We met at a diner halfway between my house and hers. Angela ordered coffee and pie. I ordered nothing because my stomach felt like it was trying to digest glass. She looked at me with those X-ray eyes and said, What do you want to know? Everything, I said. Start with Carolyn. Who was she? Angela took a sip of coffee. Carolyn Harper, 17 years old. Pregnant, terrified. One of the smartest girls I ever worked with, and I've worked with hundreds. She came to the shelter in December 1971, said her family had kicked her out when they found out she was pregnant. The father was a boy from her school who wanted nothing to do with her or the baby. She had nowhere to go, no money, no resources. Just herself and a lot of stubborn pride. What was she like? I asked, trying to imagine the teenager who gave birth to me and then gave me away. Fierce, Angela said. Scared, but fierce. She wanted to keep you. She talked about it all the time, how she'd finish school, get a job, find a way to make it work. But the shelter could only house her for 3 months. After that, she'd be on the street with a newborn. She knew she couldn't do it. So when Ruth Mitchell offered to adopt you, Caroline made the hardest decision a mother can make. Did she regret it? I asked. I think she regretted having to make the choice, Angela said carefully. But I don't think she regretted choosing you over keeping you in poverty. She loved you enough to let you go. That's not nothing. Where is she now? I asked. Is she alive? Angela hesitated. I don't know. We lost touch after the adoption. She moved away, left Pittsburgh entirely. I tried to find her a few years ago, out of curiosity, but I hit dead ends. She might have changed her name, might have moved out of state, might have decided she didn't want to be found. Or she might be dead, I said. Or that, Angela agreed. I'm sorry I don't have better answers. Why did Dad wait until now? I asked. Why not tell me when I was 20 or 30 or any time before he was dying? Angela smiled sadly. Fear, mostly. Harold loved you so much it terrified him. He was afraid if you knew the truth, you'd love him less. He was afraid you'd go looking for Carolyn and forget about him. He was afraid of a lot of things that probably wouldn't have happened, but fear isn't logical. He should have trusted me, I said, my voice breaking. Yes, Angela said, he should have. But Lorraine, listen to me. Your father was a good man who made a mistake. He loved you so much, he couldn't bear the thought of losing you, even to the truth. That's not an excuse, but it's an explanation. And now you have a choice. You can be angry, you have every right to be, or you can decide what to do next. What do I do next? I asked. How do I even begin to process this? However you need to, Angela said. There's no right way to grieve a lie. But if you want my advice, find Carolyn, or try to. Not because you owe her anything, but because you deserve to know your whole story. You deserve to hear her side. And maybe, if you're lucky, she's been waiting 40 years to tell it. I went home, I told Jasmine and Keisha what Angela had said. We sat together in Dad's house now, my house, because he'd left it to me and his while and made a plan. We would look for Carolyn Harper. We would try to find the woman who gave birth to me and then gave me away. We would try to understand what Dad had spent 40 years hiding. The search took 6 weeks. We started with public records, birth certificates, census data, Social Security databases. Caroline Harper, born 1955 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. High school dropout, no college records, no marriage license under that name, no death certificate in Pennsylvania. We hit wall after wall. Then Keisha, who's better at the internet than anyone I know, found a marriage license in Ohio. Carolyn. Harper became Carolyn James in 1978, 6 years after I was born. She married a man named Robert James. They had 2 children, David in 1979, Kay, and Sarah in 1982. I have half-siblings. The thought made me dizzy. Keisha kept digging. Carolyn and Robert divorced in 1990. Carolyn moved to Cleveland. She worked as a nurse's aide at a retirement home. She bought a small house in 1995, and in 2020 she retired. She's alive, Keisha said, looking up from her laptop. Mom, she's alive. She lives in Cleveland. I found her address. I stared at the screen. Carolyn James, age 70. Living in a modest house 40 minutes from where I was sitting. A stranger who was also my mother. A woman who had carried me for 9 months and then spent the next 53 years not knowing me. What do? I asked my daughters. You write her a letter, Jasmine said. You tell her who you are, and you give her the choice to respond or not. So I wrote, I rewrote, I wrote again. It's 12 drafts before I landed on something that felt true. Dear Carolyn, my name is Lorraine Mitchell. I was born on September 3, 1972 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was adopted by Harold and Ruth Mitchell. I believe you are my birth mother. I only learned this truth recently after my father passed away. He left me a letter explaining how he and my mother came to adopt me, and how you made the difficult choice to give me a chance at a life you couldn't provide at 17. I'm not writing to you out of anger or blame. I'm writing because I want to know you. I want to understand my story, and you are part of that story in a way I'm only beginning to understand. If you're willing, I would like to meet you, or talk on the phone, or exchange letters, whatever feels right to you. I don't expect anything from you, and I don't want to disrupt your life. But if there's any part of you that wonders what happened to the baby you gave away 53 years ago, I want you to know I'm okay. I had a good life. I had parents who loved me fiercely. I have 2 daughters who are the best parts of me. And I have questions only you can answer. I hope to hear from you, but I'll understand if I don't. Sincerely, Lorraine. I mailed it. Then I waited. 2 weeks later, my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Hello, Lorraine. The voice was older, hesitant, shaking. This is Carolyn. Carolyn James. I got your letter. I sat down hard on the couch. Hi, I said, because what else do you say to the woman who gave birth to you and then disappeared? I can't believe you found me, she said. I thought about you every day for 53 years, but I never thought I didn't think you'd want to know me. I want to know you, I said. I want to know everything. We talked for 2 hours. She told me about being 17 and pregnant and terrified, about her parents who called her a disgrace and threw her out, about the boy who got her pregnant and then denied it was his, about the shelter where Ruth Mitchell found her and offered her hope disguised as adoption. I held you for 10 minutes, Carolyn said, crying. That's all they gave me. 10 minutes to memorize your face. And then Ruth took you, and I watched you leave, and I thought I would die from the pain. But you didn't, I said. No, she agreed. I didn't. I finished school. I moved to Ohio. I met Robert. I had 2 more children. I built a life. But Lorraine, there was never a day I didn't think about you. Never a birthday I didn't wonder what you looked like, if you were happy, if your parents loved you the way I would have, if I'd been able to keep you. They did, I said. They loved me so much they lied to protect me, or to protect themselves. I'm still figuring that part out. Are you angry? Caroline asked. At them? At me? I don't know, I admitted. I'm a lot of things. Angry isn't the loudest one right now. We made plans to meet. 2 weeks later, I drove to Cleveland with Jasmine and Keisha. Caroline lived in a small house with a garden that looked loved. She opened the door and I saw my face in hers, the shape of my eyes, the curve of my mouth, the way we both stood with one hip cocked like the world might tip and we needed to be ready. Hi, she said, and started crying. Hi, I said, and did the same. We went inside. Her children, my half-siblings, were there. David, 46, and Sarah, 43, both with families of their own. They hugged me like I was an answer to a question they'd never gotten to ask. We always knew, Sarah said. Mom told us when we were old enough to understand. She said she had a baby she gave up before we were born. We grew up knowing we had a sister somewhere. I didn't know about you, I said. I didn't know I had siblings. You do now, David said simply. We spent the day swapping stories. Carolyn told me about my birth, how long the labor was, how scared she'd been, how the first time I cried, it sounded like music. I told her about growing up with Dad and the Mother, I thought, was my biological parent, about Jasmine and Keisha, about teaching middle school and the ordinary life I'd built. We found the places where our lives overlapped without ever touching. She'd driven through Pittsburgh twice in the last decade and wondered if she'd passed me on the street. I visited Cleveland for a conference 5 years ago and had no idea she was 40 minutes away. Do you forgive me? Carolyn asked as I was leaving. For giving you away? I looked at this woman who was 70 and scared and still mourning the choice she'd made at 17. There's nothing to forgive, I said. You gave me life twice, once when you carried me and once when you let me go to people who could give me what you couldn't. That's not something to forgive. That's something to honor. She hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. Thank you, she whispered. I drove home with my daughters, all three of us quiet in the way people are after witnessing something holy. Are you okay? Jasmine asked. I think so, I said. I think I'm better than okay. In the months that followed, I learned to live with the truth. I visited Carolyn once a month. We called every week. I got to know David and Sarah, who treated me like the sister I'd always been, even though we'd never met. I introduced Caroline to my daughters, and she cried when Keisha called her Grandma Caroline, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I also went back to Dad's grave. I sat there in the grass and talked to him the way I used to talk to Mom. I found her, I said. I found Carolyn. Kea, she's wonderful. She's funny and smart, and she loved me enough to let me go. Just like you loved me enough to tell me the truth, even if it took you until you were dying to do it. I told him I understood why he lied. I told him I forgave him. I told him that even knowing he wasn't my biological father didn't change the fact that he was my dad, the man who taught me to drive, who came to my track meets, who held me when my marriage fell apart, who loved me fiercely for 53 years. Biology might determine who we're related to, but love determines who we belong to. And I belong to Harold Mitchell, no matter what any birth certificate said. The nurse at my father's deathbed whispered 7 words that unraveled 40 years of lies. But what came after the searching, the finding, the rebuilding that knitted something stronger than the lies ever were? I know now where I come from. I know the woman who gave me life, and the people who gave me a life worth living. I know my whole story, the parts that hurt and the parts that heal. And I'm holding all of it with the kind of grace only truth makes possible. Angela Porter was right. Hearing is the last sense to go. Which means my father heard me tell him I loved him, heard me give him permission to go, heard me speak the words that mattered most. And maybe, in those final moments, he heard the nurse whisper those 7 words to me and knew finally, blessedly, that the truth was out and I would survive it. I'm 53 years old, the daughter of Harold Mitchell and Ruth Mitchell, who loved me. I'm the daughter of Carolyn Harper, who gave birth to me and let me go. I'm the mother of 2 brilliant daughters who are learning that family is complicated and beautiful and bigger than bloodlines. I'm a teacher, a survivor, a keeper of secrets that finally got told, and I'm still standing.